What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Lifestyle Nutrition Podcast. We got another amazing guest today. We've been in the same group, same community here for a while, and finally met for the first time last week at Coaching Con. And he's going to come on, drop just tons of good knowledge on mindset, on belief in yourself, and just all great topics when it comes to fat loss, health, whatever goals that you want to go after. So I'm so excited to bring Matt DeJesus on the podcast. What's going on, Matt?
Right on, man. Awesome to finally meet you in person too. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, I'm so pumped. We're having some good conversation just before we even started. And I was like writing notes down, like you give me some good stuff to go through to help me be a better coach. So I appreciate that. And I am so pumped. Literally, I was telling you as well, you got the best backdrop in the game. Like this.
Yeah.
Like, every time you popped onto those calls, dude, I was like, this guy is like, I figured you already had a podcast because that's like a perfect backdrop for that. Yeah.
And I have more plans and ideas for it. Trust me, I'm like not satisfied with it. There's stuff I definitely want to do, but I get quite a few compliments, which is awesome. But I spend a lot of time on Pinterest getting some ideas for sure.
That's awesome, dude. Well, let's get right into it. Like, first off, I'd love for you to just kind of give our audience just a little bit of a story on how you got into coaching, got into health and fitness, and really just how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, man. So I started as a dual athlete growing up. So always baseball and football. Those were my two sports. And I found out very quickly, I would say more so with football was where I was originally driven to how much lifting weights can separate you. I think I had too many experiences where, you know, the hammer and the nail, so to speak. And I was the nail a little too often and figured out the guy. I was like, let me be more like the hammer here, you know, just hitting in football and figured out those guys that were the hammer were training in the off season, right? Strength and conditioning program in our high school. And they were getting after it and they're coming back bigger and faster and stronger. And I was like, man, I want some of this. I need to hang out with these guys. So I found out probably about sophomore year, not freshman. I maybe just started touching weights sophomore year, transitioning into junior year, especially like getting ready to, transition, make my body capable and like these guys were. Right. And so I found on pretty early off. I say earlier than most, but, there were some guys that adopted the ability to use strength and conditioning to their performance and how it benefited them on the field. And it was obvious, like there was a separator. So I knew pretty early on. And that's where my passion started to develop with it, both for baseball and football. Right. And so from there, I transitioned, played some collegiate baseball, and we had an awesome strength and conditioning program there and played at multiple different colleges, played a little bit of minor league ball. And then from there, I noticed again, I found myself more so making that transition, no longer enjoying the sport of baseball. It was more so of a business. And you and I had talked about that before too, as well. And, you know, I enjoyed the strength and conditioning aspect of it. I love the training aspect of it and how it could improve me. And I was like, man, maybe that's what my calling is. And so went and got all my certifications. I actually went back to San Diego State to work with the strength and conditioning program as an intern. So spending literally from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., not getting paid financially, right, but in knowledge. And it was such a blessing now that I look back on it. It was a grind during the time, but I look back and go, man, I got to literally be exposed to every single different kind of sport that they had there. Obviously from baseball and football, but the basketball, swimming and diving, golf, softball, I mean, you name it, right? So like I got to experience all these different kind of high caliber athletes, the different training modalities that went into that to make them good to great and exceptional. And then I got to take that with me into when I started my career. So after my internship, I got my first job at a strength and conditioning program facility, more because I don't know if you remember back in the day, I was really into like Joe DeFranco and his training philosophies, and he was very big and like getting the NFL combine guys ready for their, you know, the difference between them making, you know, a tenth of a second was millions of dollars, and that stuff like intrigued me. I was like, this stuff's awesome, you know. And so I went to a sports performance gym in Antioch, which is in the Bay Area. And the guy who ran that played in the NFL for multiple years. He went to the University of Oregon, stud, tore it up there, and played for the Redskins, the Steelers. So he had this facility. And so he kind of did the football thing, and I came in and brought the baseball side of it. And we worked cohesively together, and it was awesome. And in that time, we got to train a ton of different high caliber athletes, getting them ready for the drafts respectively, but then also working with your everyday mom and pop, like general population, which was great too. So kind of got exposed to more than just athletes at that stage, which was phenomenal. It was great. At the time, I was like, oh man, I don't want to train like just moms and dads. Like it was boring to me, or I thought it was going to be. I just want to work with athletes. And then I got to find out like, I actually like training the general population, just, if not the same, maybe even more, just because the ability to make connection and have impact on people other than athletes, which was super cool to me. And then I would train even people down to the little athletes, just doing hitting and fielding lessons. But then I'd train like their mom and dad in the afternoons. And so it gave me exposure to a lot of different groups of people. And then after that, I transitioned into more of like the CrossFit realm. I got bit by the CrossFit bug. So I did that for a long time. That was back probably starting in like 2012, 2013, I want to say, and got the opportunity while I was still in the Bay Area to be a part of a gym at the time where the caliber of athletes were going every year to the CrossFit Games. So there was very high caliber athlete. Again, you had your general population, but I more so kind of got into the competitive side of things. And so I was at a really competitive gym and got to coach and be around in that atmosphere that really, like, since I wasn't playing baseball anymore, it was like, again, I got bit by that competitive bug, and it was the next best thing for me. I was like, oh, I can get into this. Has to do with, lifting weights and being able to be in shape, and you're doing things for time. There's a competitive aspect to it. And so I did that for quite a long time, all the way up until about 2020, I would say. And so in that process, I also coached and managed gyms, and personal trained at them. I mean, you name it. So everything's in person. And then COVID hit and everybody transitioned. The gym that I was at the time, I started doing the online classes because we were limited on how many people we could have in the gyms. And I got it had always been in the back of my head, but I kind of got I guess you could say a overwhelmingly amount of people saying, hey, when we go back to normal, or if things go back to normal, would you still be open to doing this online thing? Like people had set up their garage gyms, super cool, and they're doing at home workout. They were getting sets of dumbbells, and like there was a demand for it. And I was like, man, you know what? Like this is pretty cool. Like this is sweet. Like I've always wanted to go online. And so I told them, yeah, like let's do it. So I already had clients that were willing to and able to, if I were to be able to do this online thing, which was super cool. That was good to know that there was at least a demand for that. But I struggled at first, big time. I tried to copy people that, were super successful on social media and had a big following. And I'm like, let me just do what they're doing. It looks like they're charging like $7 a month, and, they have like 500,000 followers. I don't have that, but I'll try to make it work. And I fell flat on my face. But I guess that's why, I joined programs like you and I are in, and hired a coach and learned a lot, and still learning a lot. But man, I'm sure glad I did that, because it's brought me up now to present day, and transitioning from taking all my knowledge, and kind of I look at myself as like a junkyard accumulating all this stuff, and now being able to transition online and help people is super cool, because there was definitely a learning curve. But as soon as the dust settles, it's just like everything that I've always known, and it has its own little nuances. And now I'm coaching. I still have a handful of people in person currently, but the majority of my business, probably 95 to 96%, is online, coaching remotely now, both nutrition and the physical side of things, fitness as well.
Yeah, that's a great just come up there. A lot of and that had to have been super cool, working with like just high level athletes, getting them better. I know that's always been something in the back of my mind of like, I'd love to explore that area at a certain point. But, I'm curious, like, when did you start incorporating the nutrition side, or was that always kind of a part of your training when you were going through with all these athletes?
Yeah, it was from early on. So my degree was in exercise nutrition and wellness. So I transitioned into the nutrition side of things heavily, like when I first started getting into it. But I shouldn't say heavily, I should say very surface level. And then I figured out how and the type of impact that you can make from not only myself personally, but the clients as well when we transition to focusing on nutrition. Cause it's like, okay, we can do all this training. We can do all these double days as many times as you want and all this good stuff. It's great. And to be working with people with the highest caliber from an athletic standpoint, you'd be surprised. Those guys are the worst. So it was like getting them to get on board from a nutritional standpoint. And as soon as they bought into the process and understood when they properly fuel their body, how much of an impact it can make on their training, their performance. I mean, you name it. That was always something that I took pride in, not only with myself, but getting people to see the importance of it early on in the stages of us working together to go, oh man, I was actually working harder than I should have, physically in the past. And then all of a sudden they make this light bulb goes off and they're like, oh man, I can actually focus the majority of my efforts on my nutrition and see a world of a difference. And so that's always, till this day, that's super cool for me to see is when people really focus and dial in on the nutrition aspect, and it comes to like light on how much impact it can actually have, which is super cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know for me, I wish I would have known the stuff that I know now back when I was actually playing sports, because I ate like shit. Dude. I ate like shit. I drank. I had just a big drinking problem, and all that stuff. I was kind of think of that, and I want to go talk to like just some athletes and stuff. Be like, hey, like, because I know, especially in college, like that's a huge thing, right? Like you got like the workout side of stuff, the baseball side of stuff, but then like equally as important for a lot of people is the drinking and the partying side of things. And you're leaving so much out on the table, and I didn't realize it until after I was done. Like, I would say when I got to pro ball, I started realizing just how important the nutrition side of things was, and just how much better I could be when I dialed in the workouts and I dialed in the nutrition. Oh,
totally, dude. And don't get me wrong, that I should have been upfront with that. Like I started noticing that in my coaching career, like not as an athlete. Like I'm right there with you. Like I wish I would have known, dude, I was living off Taco Bell, Jack in the Box, like whatever, same thing, party hard, play hard, right? Like we'd party through the night, get up, go play a game the next day, guys be thrown up in the dugout. Like you just rallied, right? Like you figured it out. But yeah, I think back now and going, man, I wish there was, at least somebody that gave us that kind of knowledge, or at least preached it to us or something. It was always about like the physical side of it for sure. We knew there was an importance there, and that was obvious, but, and that's a different time in our lives too, right? Where it's like, we want to have fun, man. So it's, I don't know if you could preach it to that crowd. It'd be pretty challenging. I'll tell you that.
You're probably right. I mean, they'd have to be so locked into getting to the next level too, right?
Yeah.
Like at a different level. Because I went to D2, and personally going into it was always a dream. And I know we're going off of like just at the start here. We'll get into the mindset and belief stuff here, but I'm just really curious about this. Like when I started, like for a D2, like not a lot of guys really think it's a possibility to go to the next level, right? Like I personally just went there. I had the opportunity to play both ways, right? Baseball, hitting and pitching. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you know what? This is a great opportunity for me. My arm was messed up. I was recruited for basically pitching. Again, my arm was messed up senior year. I was like, I don't think that's a long-term play for me. So I was like, I got to be able to hit if I want to have a chance at like doing anything in college. And like, I don't think anybody at my school would have ever thought that the next level was an option, right? Like, and so you kind of get a mix of that too, where people are just going to play. And it's like, okay, like I want to play this sport that I love with my friends, but I really want to go out and like, try to get some girls and try to do this and that and whatever, like on Friday and Saturday and Thursday and Wednesday. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, exactly. That's exactly it. It was just like, I mean, and I look at it like this too. It's like, yes, we wanted to have a fun and enjoy ourselves. Don't get it wrong. We wanted to win too, but yes, I'm right there with you. It's exactly it. And to be honest with you, I look back at it now and I'm like, man, it was a blessing that we had the opportunity, both of us, it sounds like, to play at the collegiate level and get at least part of your schooling taken care of too, because I look back at it now, it's like if I wouldn't have gone to school, I don't think. It's very strong, probably no for me if it wasn't for sports. And it happened to pan out for me in a way that, I hear a lot of people like, oh, I don't use my degree and this and that. And honestly, when I was there, I was just there to play ball. And yeah, I remember the counselor asking me like, well, what do you want to do as soon as you get to like your upper division classes? And I was like, I have no idea. And they're like, well, you either do kinesiology. These are like the athlete ones. Okay, you go kinesiology, or I think it was social science, which was like broad, general, like basically you're saying, I don't know what I want to do. Right. So I was like, well, they're like, this one's about the human body and, movement. And I was like, okay, let's do that one. And my buddies were in it too. So I was like, let's do that. But I think I just lucked out that happened to be super interesting to me. But I think for most people, it's not the case. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah.
I'm math and computer science. So you tell me if I
yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I think. I just got lucky. I think our counselor was like, they might have a chance in this avenue. Like, and none of us knew. We were just, I don't think anybody really knows at that point.
No, for sure. But you know what? A lot of good times.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
But let's get into the mindset side of things. So I know that's like a huge thing. We were talking previously, and that's like a big thing for you is like mindset, belief, kind of cultivating more belief in getting your clients rather to cultivate more belief in themselves throughout the process, which, I know that's a thing I'm super passionate about as well. And I'm just curious, like, what do you all just kind of put under the umbrella of mindset and what people can kind of just attribute to that? Because I think that it's kind of a tough word where it's like, oh, you got to have a better mindset, you got to do this, whatever. Like, but I don't know if a lot of people really understand what we're always talking about. So like, how would you describe that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think when people come into my program and they choose to do it and they kind of decide like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Initially, when they join, I don't preach about like all the steps and all these X's and O's that they're going to do when they get in. They just care about the result. They're like, I want to get this result. Maybe even the individual has got it before, but they don't have the ability to sustain it. That's very popular, which I'm sure you've ran into too. So initially when they come in my program, I think 9 times out of 10, they're really taken back by how much time we spend on diving into their mindset, what their current mindset is like, more specifically, how they see themselves. Their identity is, I tell them, your identity and how you see yourself when you're alone by yourself, when nobody else is here, when you're not talking to me, when you're not talking to family, like when you're looking yourself in the mirror. I was like, that is the most important thing that is going to get you from where you're currently at to where it is that you want to go. And if it's the right mentality and mindset and identity that you see yourself in, this is going to be fun for you. If not, if it's very limiting, it's very pessimistic based, it's going to be a challenge, and that's okay. But we just got to meet you where you're at, and we can gradually transition that. So I think a lot of people aren't in this in terms of a lack of information, right? Like, especially nowadays, you can go on social media, Google, like I was even thinking today, I was like, you and I as coaches, if we had the same person come to both of us and we, based on their specifics, you and I are probably going to prescribe a very similar macro prescription for them, probably a very similar workout program. There's going to be little nuances that'll be different because we're obviously different individuals, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty similar. It's not going to be too far off. So it's not a lack of the information. People can get information wherever they want. But the second they make the connection between there's something else here missing aside from an awesome and amazing workout, from like a super cool macro prescription. And when they figure out and unlock the key that it's themselves, and accountability is a huge part of our program as well. Once they figure out specifically what I mean by accountability, meaning like we're going to dig into the nuts and bolts of what's going on between the ears, because if we can figure that out and we can get that aligned and congruent, this process is going to be really fun for you. If not, it's going to be uphill battle. It's going to feel like you're paddling in your boat upstream, which we want to flip that around. We want it to be congruent. We want to go with the stream. And when we can figure that out and people make that connection and they're in the right mindset. So that's what I mean by mindset. When they're in that stage, man, things get really fun for them and they start to blossom. It's like they unlock this key that they never saw before, never thought like made a correlation between where they're currently at and where they want to go. They just thought like, I need to work out more. I probably need to eat some whole foods and, I need to just bust my tail every single day and then I'll probably get there, which is true, right? But that's more of like a grit, motivation, white knuckle approach. Like, and some people can do that, but I think for the general population, most people speaking, that's going to be very challenging. And there's much easier ways and more fluid and congruent ways to do this for long-term life, sustainability, longevity, if that's your goal. So,
yeah, no, for sure, man. And that's all amazing. First off, like I don't think a lot of people go at that, the identity, the belief in themselves. Like, I love that you talked about like how you feel about yourself while you're by yourself. I think Tom Bilyeu was talking about that this last weekend as well. Like, he's like, that is all that matters, is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself, which is something that like I don't think a lot of people feel very good about themselves. And that's coming from somebody who's definitely working on that personally. Like all the stuff you're talking about is stuff that I've been really working heavily on myself for the last few months. And I'm curious, like, first off, what are some of the biggest struggles that you see with your clients when it comes to their mindset that you have to go at right away? Or let's just start there. Like, what are some of those biggest struggles that you do see when it comes to mindset?
Yeah, I have multiple clients that jump to mind right now because we're going through it right now and working through their process. And it seems to be a recurring theme. And just like when you bring on clients, I'm sure you ask like, what's their main struggle? You want to figure out and pinpoint some of the commonalities. And there's some that I hear often more times than not, and they get exposed like a sore thumb as we start to engage in the process, and you can see exactly where their bottlenecks at in their process. And for a lot of people, I feel like when we go off the identity piece, they start to attach themselves to whatever limiting belief you can insert, whatever it is. Like, I'll use somebody who has a binging problem. They like to attach and associate themselves as if they have the activity of they occasionally binge, whether it's at late night, they can't battle these cravings. They reach for, or they're hiding things, from their spouse to make it look like they're not eating them. And, oh yeah, I'm hitting my calories perfect. And, there's obviously something deeper going on there that, again, when we refer to how do you feel about yourself when you're by yourself, there's no hiding that. They just have an issue with, man, I binge all the time. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to pinpoint it. I don't know how to stop it. One thing that I've found that works really well for those people is to disassociate themselves with the actual action, meaning people like to label themselves. Like for me, I used to have a limiting belief of, oh, I'm not a morning person. And that partly becomes, stuff and noise that I hear from other people too. Like, oh, we're not going to have a training session till 12 p.m. because Matt's not going to get up till 11. So then I started to believe that too. Like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not a morning person. So then I attach my identity to that. Like, oh, I'm not a morning person. When now looking back in hindsight, I can change that at any moment. Like, it's not going to be easy, but I can change that. And it starts with between my ears. Same thing when a client has a tendency to binge. That's very different. The action instead of associating themselves with binging. So if somebody does binge, you might occasionally binge, and that may be the action that you do, but you're not a binger. And so I think being able to disassociate themselves with that and go, okay, you occasionally do this action. That doesn't mean that's who you are at the core in your heart and your soul. So having the ability to detach themselves and kind of just take it for face value and go, oh, I'm actually just doing that thing. But that doesn't necessarily have to mean that I have to keep doing that. I may have an issue with it and I may be able to address it, but I don't have to wear that as my clothes and be like, this is who I am. I'm a binger, right? And so as soon as people have that power and they see that they can disassociate themselves from it, man, again, they start to unlock these doors that they didn't know they had opportunity to just kind of kick down. And once they see that and go, oh, I'm just doing the action that doesn't necessarily describe who I am as a person, in my heart. And when I take my shirt off and I look at myself in my rawest form, naked in the mirror, like that's not who I am. So you don't have to be this binger. It's just something that you occasionally do. And there's a process that we could do to get out of that. So I think that's a big, monumental moment for most people when they can look at that and go, I'm not the thing that I'm actually doing, right? They can disassociate. And once they create that separation, they can move on from it.
Love that. That's huge. That's huge. Just being able to like almost just zoom out from the whole thing and look at somebody else like doing that and be like, okay, like I struggle with this thing. Cause I've definitely been culprit to this as well. Like I used to have even with the binging, I used to like label myself as a binge eater. And it's like, whenever we label ourselves with anything, it becomes a lot harder very quickly to be able to move past that, because now
Yeah.
we've locked it into the identity of ourselves.
Yeah. And myself included, dude. I still have my issues too. I had to work past that. Like I was telling you, the not being a morning person. Now I'm only a morning person, and so I'm going to choose to associate myself with the thing that I actually want. Versus if there's a current circumstance that I don't want, I like to, instead of labeling it, I go, that's just an action that I'm currently doing. And like you said, I zoom out instead of being so focused and zoomed into the weeds. Like, so micro focused, be able to kind of take a bird's eye view and go, okay, that's what I'm doing. This is where I want to go. I no longer have to associate myself with that. If I choose to, that's not who I am as a person. I'm actually going to start aligning with this over here. And as soon as you do that, make that connection, it makes it just so much easier. Again, like we were talking about the fluidity and congruence of being aligned with where it is that you want to go. It makes it so much easier. I mean, look, this stuff's already hard. It's already a challenge. And if you're working and battling against yourself in the process, it's times 10, right? It's going to be exponentially harder. So if you can get yourself on your own side, on your own team, and battle with you instead of against you, man, it becomes a lot easier in the process.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just super duper easier. And what, is there, when it comes to like mindset, do you see a lot of people struggling with, like labeling themselves as all or nothing, labeling themselves as perfectionist? Are those some common things? I know I see them a lot on my side of things. What are some tactics that you try to use with those people, besides, trying to get them to disassociate from the fact that, oh, you aren't actually an all or nothing person because of these, evidence in your life, or, you aren't a perfectionist, like because of this other evidence that you have going on here. Like, because I think a lot of times what I've seen is that people label themselves that way, like because they do it in eating or whatever, or they do it in some other area of their life, but it's not all encompassing.
Yeah, no, I think to kind of piggyback off that, I think what people do, and one of my sayings that I have on my social media and that I really stand by is start sloppy. That's like my hashtag that I use. And I think when people embrace that, including myself, it takes away this need to be perfect with things. I think as soon as you think of, I'm just going to start sloppy. I'm going to start with what I have. I don't need to have every single resource. I need to be resourceful with what I do have and start with where I'm at. And once people take that approach, things unfold for them. And then they actually get the wheels in motion, so to speak, versus sitting there, overthinking, procrastinating, waiting for things to be perfect, waiting for their timing to be perfect, waiting for the stars to be aligned. Like we know those things aren't going to happen. And so being able to just at least push the wheels in motion, because once they're in motion, they're much easier to adjust, as needed. But if you never get started, it's very hard. You're just going to procrastinate. You're going to overthink. You're going to self-sabotage mentally. And again, the more time and the separation that you have between the action of actually doing and you thinking of doing the action, you have more time to tell yourself no in that time frame. So, and I've found that out the hard way multiple times, not only with clients, but myself. And it's like, okay, let's just do. And in the act of doing, we can shape and mold and we can twist and change and adjust as we go. And I tell people, it's like the car analogy. You get behind a car, it's like, it's very hard to push if it's broken down from behind to get it going. But once it's going, keep it going. Like, and you can adjust from there, right? You can have somebody turn the wheel and go left or go right for you, but you have to get the car moving. When it's at a dead stop, is going to be the hardest. And that's always the hardest part. And so, yeah, start sloppy is one of my sayings. And I also like to look at it as like, here's what I tell my clients. This is something that helps with them big time and has it click for them and takes the pressure off being perfect is right now, as you're going through whatever journey you're going through. And as we're going through the day as a human, I like to look at it as your ability to cast votes. We're always casting votes, literally from the second we wake up to the second we go to bed, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so I like to look at it as like a ledger. And on one side, you got, okay, this is the positive side, meaning these things are congruent. These are conducive towards the direction that I want to go. And on the other side, these are not. Right? These are things that are not productive. These are not conducive to where the direction that I want to go, to the outcome, to the result that I desire. And as we're going about our day, we're casting votes on each side. And at the end of the day, as long as your ledger reads more on the positive side, it's a win. You can always do that. And I think it takes the pressure off people of going, okay, I know I'm going to cast votes that aren't going to be good. I know I'm going to have a craving. I know I'm going to eat those Oreos, or maybe even a sleeve of Oreos. But what are some other things that I could do? Well, I can wake up right in the morning and I could drink 16 ounces of water. Okay, cool. I can make my bed. Bam, there's another win. I can start going on my morning walk and get my mindset ready. Bam. So you start stacking these wins on the positive ledger side, knowing that you're going to have some negatives over here as well. But at the end of the day, I'll always ask my clients, like, how many votes did we cast on the positive side? Like, what were some wins from today? And I'll always ask them on the weekly check-ins as well. But when they think of it in that terms, it's like, they know they're going to constantly be on both sides of the ledger. We just want to win the majority. I think it takes the pressure off having to be like, oh man, I casted a couple votes on this side. I ate those Oreos. I chose to binge late at night. And so the whole day's a wash. It's like, no, well, we're still casting votes throughout the day. And when they remember that, it makes it a lot easier. It takes a lot of pressure off their shoulders.
That is awesome. I think that that whole just visual is really good, and something cool that I'm sure everybody in the audience is gonna absolutely love. So thanks for sharing that, man. That is really cool, as far as just a great way to get past the perfectionist type mindset. And I guess all or nothing as well, really, of that there's the day's not ruined because you did one thing. The day's not ruined because you ate in my case, like a bag of jelly beans or something like that. Like you get back on it with water and some walks and a workout and even the small things. And I'm curious, I've run into a lot of scenarios on my end and worked to coach better in this area. But like, when you run into people, because a lot of the people I work with, wins are tough to come by as far as like mentally, right? Like, I think that this is something that a lot of people struggle with, where it's like, you ask about wins and it's like, well, I didn't have any wins this week. Mm-hmm. Right? And what are some things that you've used with your clients that are struggle with this? I'm assuming that you've probably struggled with this in the past as well, with some people you've worked with, but what are some things you personally use to help them realize just how many wins there are actually going on throughout the day for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people will just kind of fly by the radar. And, despite me putting on a weekly check-in and knowing that I ask it every single week, there's still some incidences where people will put like NA or none on there, right? Which in case is another conversation, which I'll ask them to dive in a little bit deeper. But I think it all comes down to perspective. As cheesy and as cliche as it sounds, it's like I'll message my clients, those of which I know struggle with this in the morning, and I'll share some of my wins, right? So I'll like first thing, 5 a.m. in the morning, I'll shoot them a message, even if they're not up yet. But I'll say, hey, today's going to be great. We got air in our lungs today, right? We got another chance. We got another opportunity at this. So then they can look at everything else that happens after that today, myself included, is it's just icing on the cake, right? It's just extra credit. We got up, we got to breathe with air in our lungs today. I just got recent news of a family member this past weekend who passed away, right? Super unexpectedly. And so it's just perspective in reminding ourselves that like, hey, you got up today, you got air in your lungs, you got both feet on the floor right now. God willing that your body, you don't have anything catastrophic that happened overnight. Like all your limbs still work, everything still works. Like today's extra credit, right? And it shifts their mind of thinking of, dang, work sucks. My boss is an asshole. Like nutrition's really hard. Working out is terrible. Like this is boring. It sucks. It's uncomfortable. It shifts that mindset to being like, oh yeah, I no longer have to do any of that stuff, but I actually get to. And once they put themselves in those shoes and go like, oh, this is actually a blessing. This is an opportunity. Now the wins start firing off. They go, oh, I didn't know that's what you were talking about. I didn't know you were coming from that perspective. Like, let me put myself in those shoes and see where you're coming from. And now all of a sudden they just start rattling off the wins, and I'm a big fan of when we're in our text and in our chat with clients is anytime they say something like that, I shoot them back the little trophy emoji, right? Like, and they know like how many wins are you going to stack today on the positive side of the ledger, right? And then they can just start rattling them off like gunfire, versus before, those are the same people that fill out the weekly check-in and put NA or they put none on that part where I ask them like, what were 3 positives that happened in your week? And so as soon as they have that reframe and shift their perspective, it changes everything for them. They have to just be rooted in that correct, looking through that telescope versus, their day to day, just going through the motions on autopilot, or their subconscious has just already downloaded their previous, past limiting beliefs. And that's what they're living off of. That's their truth. That's their reality up until that current point, until we as coaches have the ability to shatter that and be like, okay, I get where you're at. And that's where most people are at, but try this perspective over here. And it's a reframe for people, and the people that accept it, man, you just like see their eyes light up. You see where their commonalities and faults were in the past, and they get excited because they're like, oh, I haven't looked at it from this side before. Like, you're right. And then they'll start messaging me like, hey, we get to work out today, coach. Like, hey, we get to prioritize protein. I get to meal prep today, and I get to hit my macro. Like, they start firing them back at you, and you go, okay, now they got it. And once they got it, it's off to the races.
First off, sorry about your loss, man. It's never.
Oh yeah, man. Appreciate it. Yep.
But I think that all of what you said is amazing. Like the solution-based thinking, the shifting from the negative mindset. It's crazy. I'm super into like the subconscious and all of that stuff. And like,
me too.
Crazy when you start going down that road of negative, all that your mind sees is negative stuff, right?
Yep.
It's easy to get stuck in that loop. But then once you shift to the positive and you shift to more of like almost like a gratitude type focus, and you get up, and like one of my big things is when I have certain clients do this is I get up and I like just flood myself with gratitude of like as many things as I can think of that I'm grateful for that day. Like try to get like 20, 30 things, you can flood yourself with a bunch of different things. And it's like the mindset that puts you in right from the start of the day is just so awesome. And
it's powerful.
It just puts in like everything in perspective. And I know that it's so hard for some people to get there, but like once you're like, you kind of keep it going, eventually it just clicks, like you said. And then it's like, oh, win. And you're just seeing them all pile up throughout the day.
Yeah. And it's not that they weren't there before, right? Like those wins were screaming at them. They just couldn't see them because everything is being overshadowed by their pessimistic mindset. And it's funny, you mentioned gratitude. I'm huge on that. And a lot of people will think that's like woo woo or like this, abstract thing until you actually put it into application and see the power and the benefit that it has. Then you won't say that anymore. Then you'll go, oh, okay, I see the power of it. And you can't put yourself in a state of gratitude and have a pessimistic mindset at the same time. It's impossible. So you're actually just tricking your mind to be in the right state of mind so that you can actually be aware of the awesome things that are going on literally every second, every day, in our lives that are happening. Or you can run on autopilot, and it's funny. It's like wherever we want to direct our energy and whatever it is that we're thinking, that's exactly where it's going to go. Whether we think we can or we can't, like that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's going to become our reality. And it's like, I don't know if you follow Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he's big on, your personality determines your personal reality, right? It's like, it's so true. And it's exactly what is constantly on your mind, whether you're aware of it, most of the time we're unaware, right? So downloading that programming and positivity and optimistic mindset is super key, so that if we know we're running on autopilot throughout the day, what is our hardware that we've downloaded to just run on autopilot? Is it mostly negative? Is it mostly positive? Is it pessimistic? Like, if that's our operating system throughout the day, we're just like computers, then no wonder you have all these limiting beliefs and these tough, challenging thoughts that you can't do this, and, work sucks and everybody's against you. And, this victim mentality. Versus, like you saying, starting the day off with intentionality and being in control and going, man, what are some things that I'm grateful for today? It can completely shift your mindset and perspective just on life, not even just in health and fitness, but you'll see your life change. And it's funny, you'll hear people talk about it until you actually put it into application. You go, oh, I see what they were talking about here. And once you actually do it, and it can change your life for sure.
No, for sure. And Joe Dispenza, absolute money. Just, I love everything that guy puts out.
Yeah.
I got to listen to his stuff like 15 times to like really grasp what he's talking about, because it's so in depth.
It'll go over your head, and I got to play that back, or I got to listen to that again. Like, yeah, he's awesome, man. I love his stuff.
He's so great. Like, I spent way too many hours like watching his, like everything that he has, like trying to
me too.
Pick up something new, because it makes so much sense. And like the success stories within that are just so amazing, just with the healings that they've had and the breakthroughs and, all that stuff. And do you do like his type of meditations and stuff like that? Are you into meditation?
I do. I haven't like got his courses or anything like that, but just the stuff he has on YouTube, I think people just took his courses and put them on YouTube. So I probably got him unintentionally, but yeah, I do his mindful meditations, his mind resets. And I do. I mean, I listen to all his podcasts and stuff too, but his actual practices, yeah, I'll listen to him on YouTube.
No, that's awesome. And is there anything like that you do with your clients around that, like where to help them shift their reality just on top of the whole shifting from a negative or pessimistic mindset to more of a solution-based positive mindset?
Yeah. So the first 21 days when my clients come on with me, we do something called the 21-day jumpstart, which essentially is it's a few different things, but think of it as terms of the basics and the fundamentals, meaning everything starting first and foremost with mindset, but making sure we get proper hydration, sleep, X amount of steps for the individual based on where they're at, establishing a maintenance. Like it's just all the fundamentals, but right at the top is the mindset. And in our app, when they click on the mindset, I have a 3-step process on there. And for one, it's visualizing what you desire. And this can take 5 to 10 minutes. If you're on a crunch, it could take 5 minutes. And if somebody says, I don't have 5 to 10 minutes, then we make 5 to 10 minutes. Right. So we start with that. We start with intentionality. What is it that you desire? Meaning like not that you actually just like kind of want or you think is cool, but I try to get people in the position, desire is huge. And so I really hammer on that in the program, not what you kind of think would be sweet if all the stars align and you could kind of get it. Like, what do you want? Like deep in your core. And when people think from that perspective, it shifts to most of the time they get away from like these vanity goals. And it's more so like, well, I need to stop making excuses that I can't play with my kids at the end of the day because I'm overweight. I have no energy. I'm exhausted. Like I'm literally taking years off the end of my life. Like I need to change. I want to change that. I want to change it for my kids. I'm embarrassed because my daughter threw, one of my clients told me this the other day. She threw a ball over the fence when we were playing catch and we were playing in the yard. And I had to go all the way around the fence to go get it. And this is like a waist high fence. And she asked me, Dad, why do we have to go around? And in his gut, he made an excuse going, oh, it's just the safe way, sweetie. Like I'm going to go around. But in his head, he's like, I'm fat. I'm out of shape. I'm going to hurt myself trying to hop this fence, And so it's like things like that where what's your desire? It's got to actually move you. It's got to pull you towards it. There's a difference between like being motivated and pushed from something versus something that's pulling you towards it because you desire it so much. And so that's what I try to get everybody to figure out in the first 21 days. Like, let's spend some time figuring out what that desire is for you. The second step is figuring out why you want it. Like, why is it important to you? In this individual client's case, it was like, well, I don't want to die early. I want to be at my daughter's wedding, right? Like I want to be around for her. I want to help raise her. I want to be here for her. And the schedule that I'm currently on right now that's not going to happen. So that's his why. He has a really strong why. And then the third step is, what are you willing to do to commit to today, even if it's small? What's one thing you're willing to do to commit to put this into play, to put this into action, to take one step closer? And I have them do that 3-step process for the first 21 days. And then people who don't have that as like ingrained second nature by that point, we'll extend it out further. But the first 21 days is a great opportunity in those first 3 weeks to really hammer down what's your desire, why do you want it, and then what are you willing to commit to today? And I put that on their schedule literally every single day as something to check off. And it sounds cheesy. It sounds like this practice where you're like, oh, that's kind of woo-woo. It's kind of out there. But it literally gives purpose to every single thing that we're doing. It's no longer like, oh, yeah, Matt tells me to drink some water. Oh, yeah, Matt tells me to hit X amount of protein and this many calories. It's like there's no longer any question behind it. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember why I'm doing this. I remember what I want. And this is the thing that I said I'm willing to commit to it. And now everything is cohesive. And once people can get that, man, it's a game changer for people versus just going like, oh, Matt, I want to lose 5-10 pounds because we got a beach party coming up. And I think it'd be cool to, be able to take my shirt off. And I think it would look good. It's like, okay, that's a lot different than, the client I was just talking about who is embarrassed, who has to lie to his daughter because he's fat, he's out of shape, he's overweight, he's literally slowly killing himself. Like, so it just has to be impactful for people, I think. And I try to get deeper than surface level with people on that. And once people have something that they desire versus just like this surface level, I'm motivated to do this thing. Don't get me wrong, motivation's a good starter, but it's not going to finish them through the whole program. There's going to be opportunity to give up and throw in the towel if you're just solely focused on that, right? Like motivation is going to be very temporary. So the difference between having that desire and them being pulled towards something is completely different. And that's what allows them to go through the ebbs and flows that they're going to face, not if, but when they're going to face during their journey. And I think it gives them the confidence and belief in themselves that they can do this once they start stacking those wins on a daily basis. Everything just is much more aligned in the process.
That is awesome. Yeah, no, you've been dropping some gold here. That 3-step is great as far as just like anybody out there to utilize on a daily basis to really get that fuel going. And I mean, first off, doing the exploration, right, to get that, because I've realized a lot more. I talk a lot about like emotional wise, like having something that's like tied emotionally, kind of like, your client, where it's he wants to be able to be alive, to be at his daughter's wedding. Like if that doesn't get you like a little bit emotional, like, that's kind of that's really pulling you in the direction. Right. It's like that's the kind of thing. And for a while, honestly, I talk about with my clients, like, we got to go deep with the why. We got to go deep with the why. On the kickoff calls, I'll try to dig into it a little bit and really try to get them to, like, if they don't have a deep why, like, think about it a little bit more and really like something that is tied to somebody else. I think that's a huge thing. And I was kind of lying to myself for a while about this. Really, I was like, oh yeah, I have a good why. I have a good why. But recently I've really developed a really emotional why in my life. And that it's crazy the shift that it made for me and how much easier it is for me to do the stuff that I know I need to do to get to where I want to go. And just kind of bringing a little more light even to just how important that is, the 3 steps that you have there. And so I love everything about that, man.
Yeah. And like me too, like, and it can change too. Like for me, I know it's changed in the past. Like for me right now, currently I'm in that process of finding it. It used to be something that was very strong and pulled me, and it kind of dwindled out, or I got close enough to where I'm like, okay, I need to reshift and focus. And so that's the stage that I'm currently in. Right. So I go through it too. But the people that actually find it, and if they're not looking for it, the process becomes really hard. Their journey is going to be really tough. There's going to be a lot of friction. There's going to be friction anyways, but your ability to navigate through it will be a lot easier just by simply taking yourself through that process. Like you said, find that emotional why. For me, it's like find that desire, very similar, same thing, right? Something that's going to pull you towards it, because I can get up every day and like, again, white knuckle and just grit and listen to some Ray Lewis and motivational speech and Eric Thomas and like go do my workout and crush it. It's like, okay, cool. But eventually at some point that fuse is going to burn out. So I need to have something that's pulling me. I like to use the analogy too. It's like, it's totally different if somebody's getting chased by a dog and you're motive driven. Like you're not going to worry about like what the weather looks out like today, or if you have the right shoes on to run away from this dog that's chasing you right now. You're just going to go. So I'm a huge fan of that, meaning it's going to get you started. It's going to get you moving. But what I see from a lot of clients and a lot of people who struggle in the process is they have an amazing start because they're motive driven, which is phenomenal. It's going to get you going. It's going to get the wheels spinning. But as soon as that dog stops chasing you, you can slow down, right? You can kick your feet up. And that's what I see a lot of people do is like they get driven motivationally away from this pain, whether it's I'm out of shape, I have zero energy. My spouse doesn't look at me the same way anymore. And it's just motivation. Like I'm going to prove somebody wrong. They said I can't do this. Right. And that motivation is enough to get them going. And all of a sudden they get far enough away from where they don't feel that pain anymore. The dog's not chasing them, so to speak, and they can slow down and they can kick their feet up. And that's a slippery slope, because now all of a sudden they start sliding back to where they started, or in some cases, which we've experienced clients where they go back to even worse, right? It's the people that do the ketos. It's the people that do the lemon detoxes or whatever, right? These short, quick fixes with no plan to go exponentially to change their life. And so that's where it comes into play, what you and I are talking about. Find your emotional why, figure out your desire, because now instead of having a dog chase from behind you, you have this gravitational pull towards something, which is totally different, which is that transition of right where you feel like that pain is no longer strong enough to keep pushing you. You need to have that desire that'll keep pulling you to go the rest of the way. And most people don't have that or figure that out. They just do the motive driven, The dog's chasing behind them. But as soon as that dog leaves, you slowly go back to where you started before. And so that's a big transition that I see from people that don't bridge that little small gap, and they just keep ping ponging back and forth between, let me get good enough to where I can slowly slide back to where I was. And then bam, I'm back in this pain again. And it's this vicious cycle that goes over and over until they establish that emotional why, until they figure out that desire. And then they have the opportunity to take it above and beyond.
It does take some time too, right? Like it's
Oh, yeah.
one of those things where a lot of people stay surface level. I want to feel better. I want to look better, and like all that stuff. And it's nice. That's nice little extra credit to what's going to happen. But yeah, if you're fixing something deep, then that's a whole different story. And sometimes it can be a little scary to go there too, I think. Like it's and also you kind of get like the scary to go there to, you've been this way and like, what's it going to be like when I do get this body or when I do get this health or whatever? Like it's so different than their reality that it's like scary to see what that looks like, I think.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the unknown is always where you're going to progress and move and stretch. Right. And it's like, of course it's going to feel uncomfortable. Of course it's going to feel scary. And us as humans are designed, by nature in order to survive and protect ourselves, right? That's our survival mechanism kicking in, is going, oh, don't do this. This is uncomfortable. Like, I want to protect myself. We should stay where it's nice and cozy and warm and comfortable. And people they understand that miserable is comfortable, that having a negative mindset most of the time is comfortable. And so, yes, of course, bridging the gap and going into these new things that literally cause you to change the person that you currently are going to be uncomfortable. But knowing to love and embrace that feeling is a skill in itself. And once it's developed, it's amazing to see when people do. But yeah, people want to stay where it's comfortable. People want to stay they'd rather be miserable and negative because it's comfortable. And the second they get stretched into an unknown that is actually going to progress them and go into the direction that they want to go, or get those new desires, man, people will slide back because it's uncomfortable. And the more you learn to embrace that being uncomfortable. And I found in my life certain situations too, where I was like, man, where I like moved out of state, like doing things like that. It's things that were like stretched me, that were super uncomfortable. I was like, every time I look back in hindsight, I was like, man, I had massive growth when I did that. And I remember how uncomfortable that was. It sucked. Like the fear leading up to the actual moment was probably the worst part. And then once you look back now, when it's all said and done, you go, man, like, I got to seek more opportunities like that. I got to seek more opportunities where I get uncomfortable, because look at how much I grew from it. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, is like being able to zoom back out. Don't be so caught up in the weeds. Zoom out and go, okay, is this uncomfortableness right now going to pay off leaps and bounds down the road? Will my future self thank me? If the answer is yes, then you got your answer,
That's really good. I think like it's the pain, like that pain and discomfort is really what leads to the most results, the most growth. Like that's what I've seen. And I definitely, it's so hard when you're standing on that ledge, right? And you're like, you got that foot out, or it's like, kind of like the water, you got that foot, you're kind of dipping the toe in the water. You're like, oh, that's pretty cold.
Oh, yeah.
And then actually jumping in is a whole different story. But generally, once you get yourself to do that, it's crazy what you can accomplish and the changes that you actually do see in your life. And so I think that's great. And, everything just about what you've been saying here is just that pure gold. And so thanks again for taking some time. And I got two more questions for you. So
yeah,
you're actually the first guy. I'm trying to like develop, a lot of podcasts have like kind of an ending question sequence. And I'd love to just kind of start this with you, Matt, and just get your advice. Like what's the worst health and fitness advice you've ever received?
Oh man, that's a great question. The worst health and fitness advice. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have to be nutrition. It could be anything, right?
Oh, anything. Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest misconception that people think is that they get to wherever it is that they want to go, the temporary, and they haven't eliminated their finish line. They haven't understood that this is a lifestyle and a lifetime commitment. I think people just think there's this end result. And once you get there, kind of like what we were talking about before, is you can relax once you get there. And the people who understand that I'm literally going to draw a line in the sand. I'm going to decide to do this for myself. And not only that, I'm going to decide to become a different person. And when they do that, they're no longer just doing this external thing. They can do something that they feel fully aligned with. And by eliminating the finish line, they're committed to doing things for a lifetime, for a lifestyle. I'm all about sustainability. And so when I'll give you an example is when people come on with me and they're like, I want to, I used to work out a lot in the past. So when we start, and I ask this on my intake form, how many days a week are they willing to work out? Some people will put like 5 and 6 days. And I'll say, well, how many days are you currently working out right now? They're like, none. Okay. So you want to go to 5, from 0 to 5 to 6. And they're like, yeah, I'm ready to do this. Like I'm all in. I'm like, okay, great. I love that. But let me ask you this. How many days are you willing to commit to for the rest of your life? They're like, for what? For working out? Yeah. Oh, and I said, well, good, bad, ugly week. Like if you have a horrible week, how many days are you willing to commit to no matter what happens at work, no matter what life throws you? How many days do you know that you can officially, confidently, 10 out of 10, check the box that you can complete during the week? Oh, well, probably like 2 or 3. Okay, cool. Let's start there. And once we do that, they create this new established reframe from a mindset perspective of, okay, it's not all just go, 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 go. There's no like, how quick can I get to this finish line? It's like, what am I willing to commit to that's going to change for the rest of my life? And once I can put people in that mindset perspective, those are the people that are going to be successful no matter what, regardless of the time frame that it takes them to get there. So I think the biggest misconception is that you're going to get there quick. The more that you do, the more that you load onto your plate, the more dialed in that you're going to be. I'm like, no, what's going to be most sustainable? And for everybody, it's different. So I think that's the biggest thing is if I could preach that to everybody is like, figure out what's sustainable for you in your current circumstance, in your current condition, not what worked best for your friend because they did, Atkins or keto or whatever crash course diet and they got results really fast. But now they're back to where they started, right? And so if they can eliminate like this hard finish line perspective and kind of extend their time horizon and just decide that they got to become a different person, it's off to the races.
That's good. That's good advice from the bad advice. Yeah. Like
yeah.
There's that it stops at their goal. Yeah. Like that's kind of, you see that, like you said, with keto, I mean, nothing against keto other than
no, it works for people. Like,
yeah, I think that majority of people do it just to get to their goal. And I try to ask people, like when I hear that they're doing keto, I'm like, is this something that you think you could stick to for life? And half the people don't even answer me my question, but the ones who do answer, like, they're like, no, I do like carbs. And I'm like, well then, just think about this, that if you're doing something completely different than you actually think you can stick to, like what are the odds that you get there? And I think that, a lot of people lie to themselves, right? And I've definitely been there, so I get it. But I think that's definitely good, bad advice. But
yeah. It's like, what's the outcome? Like, what's the long-term sacrifice that's going to happen here? Like, and I think people just think at like, what's going to happen in the next 30 days? What's going to happen at the end of 6 weeks? Like even with our program, like what's going to happen at the end of 3, 6, 12 months? And it's like, there's no finish line, like boot the finish line. And then it takes this pressure off of having to be somewhere by a certain time, by a certain date. And if you don't, again, it's all or nothing. Like I failed, I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. And it's just like this landslide of the opposite direction versus going, nope, I'm going to gradually commit. This is how much I'm willing to commit in this process. If I can extend my time horizon, then I'm going to learn to actually enjoy what is laid out for me on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis and find the wins in that versus going, let me get here as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to do it unsustainably. And that would probably most likely have been a waste of time because I'll be back to where I was, if not, hopefully not worse. And so we see that happen all too often in our industry. So I think it's just like, quit getting sucked into the like get fit quick and get in shape quick and all these little quick band-aid fixes that require stitches on a deep cut, so to speak. It's like commit to it, dive in fully deep, decide that you're willing to change the person that you currently are to create what you want in the future. And when people do that, it's awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we all know that every time that you fail, right, and you slip back to where you were before, it becomes harder to get those results again, right? And so it's like each time you see these, yo-yo dieters have been doing it for 10, 20 years, becomes a hell of a lot harder to get those results again. And so,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And those are the people we take on, right? Like those are the people that we join our program and can have impact and create a difference and finally put an end to that. Cause like you said, that can be a vicious, never ending cycle if you let it. If there's no cog in the system to pattern interrupt that'll just keep happening. And so being able to look at it from a different lens can literally change somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. And question 2. So question 2 of 2 is just, what's the best health and fitness advice you've ever received?
The best health and fitness advice that I've ever received?
Yeah, like personally, like maybe what you think is the best out there, like kind of up to you how you want to answer this.
I'll say this. I think there's definitely no one size fits all, but one of the things that really transitioned into helping me personally, and then also me being able to coach individuals, was being able to, if I'm talking about myself, meeting myself where I'm currently at. It's very hard to not play the comparison game, both from a business perspective, from a health and fitness perspective. We're all going to do it. We're all going to compare to our favorites and who we look up to. And I'm not saying don't do that. But the second you start playing the comparison game, it's usually a dead end road. And what I mean by that is take, for example, where you're currently at, given your current circumstance, and then just try to build off of that. And I'm saying that out loud so that I constantly remind myself as well. But I tell it to my clients all the time. It's like, if I bring somebody on in a program and I'm having them, for example, like try to hit their macronutrients and try to prioritize 80% whole foods, and their first introduction to health and fitness is my program, and they're coming fresh off the couch eating Cheetos and they've never even touched a weight before in their life. Okay, cool. I got to meet them where they're at. So I would say that's probably one of the best advices that I've ever personally heard, and that has allowed me to transition into my coaching to my clients, is you got to meet each individual where they're willing to be at and where they're willing to commit. So I'll often ask people, based on the protocol that we have laid out right now, and even just our weekly goals, what's your willingness to commitment based on the plan that we have right here? And if it's not a 9 or a 10 out of 10, you have to track backwards to see what is going to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And then it takes the pressure off trying to be perfect. It takes the pressure off trying to stretch somebody or yourself too far than what you're capable of. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for setting the bar super high and creating a new standard for yourself, because you have to do that. But I think the gradual progression is most sustainable, that's going to last and it's going to stick for a long period of time. Like we were talking about earlier, you can build off of it the second you have momentum. But if you set that bar too high and then you constantly can't reach it, you're going to feel like a failure. And that's when people give up and they throw the towel in. So I'm all about like getting wins, meeting yourself or the client where they're currently at, and just build from there. It might be something as simple as like, okay, you have no idea what you're tracking as far as your awareness from a nutritional standpoint right now. I just want you to journal and write down your next 3 days, right? Preferably, I'd like you to include a weekend day in there, but good, bad, ugly, don't change anything. Let's see where you're currently at, and meeting those people where they're at. Other people will come into the program. They know exactly what they're currently taking from a macronutrient standpoint. They know how long they've been doing it. They know exactly their weekly average for their body weight. Like, there's totally different, skill levels here, and there's totally different training levels here. And so being able to meet each individual and understand where you're personally at can open up a world of less stress in the process, have more fun, and actually enjoy it. So I would say that's probably some of the best advice that I've ever got, is meet yourself where you're at and meet the clients where they're currently at, and then just progress from there.
Amazing advice. Amazing advice. Yeah. And I think that's a great, first off, great bad advice. You ended up parlaying that to some great advice for everybody out there. And then just awesome advice there on meeting everybody where they're at. I think that's huge and just something that a lot of people struggle with. You see the 0 to 5, you were talking about that. Oh, I was working out 0 times. This is kind of the New Year's resolution, right? Like, oh, I was working out 3 times, but now I'm going to do 5 times a week. And then you see that like pretty quickly, right? It's just crazy. So that's all amazing. And thanks again for popping on, Matt. Like, this has been amazing. So much great advice. Like, I appreciate you popping on, and I'd love for you to just end by telling everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, man. And again, thanks for having me, dude. I'm glad we finally got to meet in person. We've seen a lot of each other online and in the Zoom chats and our mentorship group, but it was great getting to meet you last week at the conference. And I'm looking forward to us doing stuff and working together in the future too, man. But as far as where people can find me, everything's Fit with Matt. That's my branding. Fit with Matt on Instagram, TikTok, all social media. Matt DeJesus is my actual name, because I'm sure there's probably other Fit with Matts out there, but I tried to grab those usernames as quick as I could. Might be separated by some underscores, but yeah, Fit with Matt is all my social media.
Awesome, dude. Well, go follow Matt. He's giving out great advice just like he did today. Appreciate you again. And if this is helpful, make sure you like, subscribe, share, whatever you got to do, rate us. We appreciate all of it. It allows us to get it out to everybody else out there and helps more people. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again, Matt, for taking some time today. And we appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. And we're going to get you in my group soon too.
Let's do it.
All right.